Suara saya yang gede gitu. Suara saya yang gede gitu. Suara saya yang gede gitu. Suara saya yang gede gitu.
Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Tes. Okay, please permit me to repeat. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. All praises be to Allah who has given us health and opportunity so that we can meet in this very wonderful condition. Peace and salutation be upon our Prophet Muhammad SAW, along with friends and family who has brought us from the darkness into the lightness. My respectable to Vice Dean 3 of the Faculty of Medicine, Dr. Rina Suryani Oktari, SCAP MSE, our moderator for today, Mrs. Vida Yuliana Firidanda, SPSI PSI Psikolog, and also our speaker for today, Mrs. Natasa. And also for all of the guest lecture participants on today's activities. I am Naomi Aristo as the master ceremony of the day, and I welcome you to our guest lecture today with topic on understanding the challenges of disaster victim identification, perspective of Australian forensic practitioners involved in international operation with Mrs. Natasa Adamovic, PhD from Charles Darwin University, Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our guest lecture for today, we will hear a welcoming speech that will be delivered by our Vice Dean 3, the Faculty of Medicine by Dr. Rina Suryani Oktari, SCAP MSE. To Mrs. Okta, the time is yours.
Oke, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahilladzi hadana li hadza wa ma kunna linahtadiya laula an hadanallah. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la syarikalah wa asyhadu anna Muhammadar abduhu wa rasuluh la nabiyya ba'da. Very good afternoon and welcome to Natasha. But Natasha, this is your second day, so I hope you enjoy the visit to museum and mosque and also Honorable Professor Taufik, Dr. Busro, Dr. Sharifah, and Mrs. Vida as our moderator today. Also our staff committee who already prepared this event today, and our students. Most of them are now taking a profession program, so they already graduate as a Bachelor of Medicine. Now they are continue to take clerkship to become a medical doctor. And yeah, we have strong collaborations between Universitas Kuala and Charles Darwin University, where Miss Natasha come from. We already signed the MOU between our rector and also the, what you call that? It's the rector or rector, same, yeah, right? So it's already signed last year. And hopefully this will be as part of the implementations of the MOU that has been signed. So one of the purpose of Natasha visit is to have joint research, specifically in disaster victim identifications. So mostly related to disaster and forensic. That's why here we have our expert today. And yeah, hopefully not only joint research, but we can have future collaborations, including joint lecture or a guest lecture like today. And yesterday we met with our Dean of Faculty of Medicine, Natasha Kuala, and we also invite Natasha to become our international lecturer. So she can also like give a lecture via online or when, because Natasha will also have another visit longer than this time, because this time Natasha will only here until Saturday, right? So that's why I asked Natasha whether she can provide a guest lecture for us. And thank you so much for your willingness to share your research on disaster and victim identifications. As you know, you already visit the Tsunami Museum where in 2004, the city was totally destroyed by the tsunami. And we learned a lot that we need to be more proactive in preparing ourselves for future disaster. And yeah, that's why in our faculty, especially in the Bachelor of Medicine program, we have a specific curriculum on disaster management. So we have some like practices, including the disaster victim identifications under Professor Taufik's supervisions. So yeah, hopefully this lecture will not only give benefit for us here in this room, but also yeah, all the participants joining online, because we also make it available for those who couldn't join with us in this room. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much again, and have a great session with Miss Natasha. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for Mrs. Okta for the welcoming speech. And for our guest lecture today, we will be guided by our moderator. And before we start the guest lecture, let me first allow me to read the moderator CV first. So today's activity will be guided by Mrs. Wida as our moderator, and Mrs. Wida pursued her undergraduate education in the psychology faculty of the University of Indonesia and also continued her magister profession study of child and clinical psychology department at the psychology faculty in University of Indonesia. And currently, Mrs. Wida is also one of the lecturers in the psychology department, Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Syah Kuala, and also an active clinical child psychologist. And to Mrs. Wilda.
So we don't use it. No. Okay. Oke, baik. Kedengaran? Oh, yeah.
Can they hear it if we
It's
speak?
afraid
only?
if
No?
we don't use the mic, they cannot hear us.
Is it?
Yes. It's
Okay.
quite everyone.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you for the time. Thank you MC for the opportunity. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi washabihi ajmain. First of all, I want to greeting Mrs. Yes, Mrs. Natasha for coming here, for already coming here and give her time to have this lecture for us. This lecture, like Mrs. Okta already said, that uh, we are going to have any discussion that is that close to the topic of criminology, disaster, and sociology and something like that. And our topic is understanding the challenges of disaster victim identification, the perspective of Australian forensic practitioner involved in international operation. Right, Mrs. Natasha? Okay. And because Mrs. Natasha really want to start it now, yeah, right? Without waiting any longer, I will only read some of your CV. Is it okay? Mrs. Natasha is really have really experience in a lot of area. Exactly, she has 4 major masters in 4 different area, and he has also 2 PhD degree. And this opportunity to go in Universitas Syah Kuala also one of her research in her second PhD. Okay, so she has a lot of experience in her area. So this is our opportunity to have a lot of discussion about sociology, criminology, psychology, disaster, and everything like that. Okay, Mr. Natasha is the lecturer of the Charles Darwin University in Australia. She has the current master of specialist teaching in Federation University. Mrs. Natasha also have the diploma of counseling, diploma of training, design and development, diploma in vocational education and training, diploma in mental health, has certification in disability, has diploma in community services. She also has the Master of Art by Research from University of Tasmania. Wow, it's very long. Now, Mrs. Natasha is the senior lecturer and unit coordinator of the placement senior lecturer coordinator the exam supervisor and leader. Mrs. Natasha is also in Stanley College, Bachelor of Community Services, and also the senior lecturer and coordinator unit in also from the CDU, Charles Darwin University. She also the program coordinator of early career discovery from North Metropolitan College Tafe in Perth. Wow. You are really, really good. And a lot of volunteering position in the Uniting Care West, Uniting Hepatitis WA, Department of Corrective Services, and Red Cross also, right? And Mrs. Natasa also have the professional development in self-harm and suicide awareness, identifying and responding of to sexual behavior, and the voice of autism, and much more. So because of her really enormous skill, so this is our time to have and listen to her discussion about the DVI, disaster victim identification. Okay, so Mrs. Natasha, time is yours.
Yes. They have to hold that button? No? No? Okay. Hi everyone. It's not that impressive, trust me. It's just no. Salam alaikum, everybody, and thank you very much for having me. Okay, it's a real nice pleasure, and you must be a very special group of people. I'm terrified from the medical. Anything goes, but medical and blood and dealing with people, no, nothing like that. So I always wanted to be a psychiatrist. But back home, I didn't have that opportunity because to study where I lived, only business was available. So I studied political economy and political science, majoring in accounting and economy. Did my MBA as well. And when we moved to Australia, I said, my time, is now. I'm just going to go back and study again. At the time, I was 42. And as I said, I wanted to be a psychiatrist. So I went to university and said, I want to be a psychiatrist. And they said, you have to finish your medical school first. And I was like, no, I want to be a psychiatrist. I don't want to deal with the blood or anything like that. And they said, unfortunately, no. So what was the closest? Do I speak too fast? It's okay. Just stop me because that's my Serbian heritage. We speak like a waterfall. Even though I do work with international students back home, so Bachelor of Community Services, they're purely international students, and I try to be as slow as possible, but sometimes I just get carried away. So the closest equivalent to psychiatry was to become a psychologist. So that's exactly what I did. I studied psychology, criminology, and justice. And then I saw myself within the prison. I wasn't prisoner, I was a psych at the prison. I loved my prisoners. I really enjoyed that time. I worked at the hospital a lot. And in the meantime, while working, I studied another master's by research, obviously studying criminology and justice. Then I did another one by the coursework and so on and so forth. It looks impressive on a paper. Trust me, it's not as impressive. You just spend my life studying, and I did promise to my husband I'm gonna stop now once I finish. But oh, what's that? Is it me? Oh my goodness, I hate microphones. I'm a very loud person, so my students can hear me very well. But for the sake of online people, let's use that funny invention. Look, I wasn't really sure what to and what will be the topic to talk about today. Generally speaking, you probably know more about disasters than myself, and probably around the DVI, disaster victim identification, probably again more than myself. But what you probably don't know is that Western perspective, how they see it. That was my good guess. I hope that's the case. You maybe know from reading the literature, but it's totally different knowledge, getting it from someone who actually spoke to these guys, to these professionals. So I'm going to walk you through, and you're very welcome to stop me anytime. Just raise your hand and ask any questions, okay? I don't mind. Okay. I did make the PowerPoint just for you to kind of be engaging and not blah, 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 just to talk. I like PowerPoints and not really impressive at all. It's very simple and boring, but it's going to be like a good reminder for myself, you know, if I get lost, because I talk, you will see I talk a lot. So, yes. So, what for my master degree, how I came up, I come from Serbia, so I don't have any disasters, thanks God, or Supreme Being. We don't have many floods, or we do have occasionally earthquakes, but we don't have a major disaster. Neither we have a terrorist attacks or anything like that. So we are kind of, let's use the word lucky from that side. However, I did have a very unpleasant experience with the war, civil war. So many of our people end up in mass graves, and you know, I just don't want to go into that direction. But why I have decided, I met many friends in Australia, they're still looking for their dead ones. If they would know even where the mass grave is, just to find and bury them and give them a proper respect and burial. So when I was thinking about studying the DVI, going into that direction, I found myself wondering why is that time from the disaster to a last processing, giving the body to a family, why is it too long? Why does it take so long? I don't know whether you are very young, you probably don't, but maybe from your literature and reading the literature, do you remember the MH17, the plane that got shot down above the Ukraine a few years ago? So we waited for 2 years. We lost the granddad, grandma, and 3 little grandkids from Perth. So we actually waited 2.5 years for repatriation of the body of the granddad. Grandma and the grandkids we received in approximately 6 to 8 months time. However, for the granddad, we waited for 2.5 years. So I personally, I'm still, as I said, I'm not a medical person with not medical background, not the knowledge. And I always comment, this is ridiculous. You know, why is it so timely? Why is it so long? What is it? Is it the bureaucracy? Is it we don't have enough staff? What is it? Why it takes so long to get our loved ones and give them proper respect in the burial? So this is how I came up with an idea to study DVI as much as I can. I don't think so that there is a word written about DVI that I haven't read it and haven't used it. And I would never stop. Disaster is my thing. I love it. I enjoy it. So also when Dr. Okta said that you are, even though being a medical staff, you have units and subjects or whatever you call it, talking about the DVI and the preparedness in disasters, this is absolutely amazing. I wouldn't think that any medical college anywhere in the world have that preparedness units within the medical staff. This is amazing. Why? Why I'm saying that? Because when I interviewed forensic pathologists, police, anyone in Australia, they never received any preparedness whatsoever. I'm not talking about the educational side. I'm talking about the work side as well. Education, no, I don't think so. We just simply don't have that within our curriculums. It's amazing what you're doing here. Keep up the good work, though. So I have decided to walk you through my master research and what I have found as the challenges. I was interested. I wanted to know Why so lengthy? You know, what is holding them back? But then while doing my research, I expanded internationally. And then I have found, obviously, the topic for my PhD. Back then, it wasn't. I am very much interested now for my PhD research that I'm going to partially be doing in Banda Aceh. I'm interested in how important is the culture within the DVI. How can we found the door and how can we find the pathway to get the culture embedded into the DVI process itself? Because more or less we can say the DVI process is kind of structured and legal and be more legality than anything else. So how can we sneak in the culture and actually show the importance of culture within the DVI process itself? I know it can't be uniformed. I know it can't be globalized because every single person, I mean, obviously, Banda Aceh, yes, it's the same religion. But what if we have many? What if we have 55 religion in one place when the disaster occurs? What we're going to do? How are we going to do the selection? So how to actually embed the culture? It doesn't really matter which culture. It doesn't really matter which religion. Okay, so at the moment, let's see how we go. We're going to collect some data and see and analyze. Maybe it's not important at all. We'll see. To me and my understanding, I think that's a very, very important aspect on the DVI itself. And I really apologize for this, you know, it's falling off the time all the time because I don't have experience with it. I just wanted to respect the culture itself. So let's have a look what I actually found while exploring the challenges of the Australian professional forensic, not necessarily forensic, well, like responders and maybe some admin people as well. But generally speaking, what they have, what they actually shared with me while doing my research. So what is the DBI? If you can have a look on the slide, this is a very fancy explanation what it is. It comes from obviously Interpol. Do you know what the Interpol is? Have you ever read anything about it? And this is a special body obviously located in Europe. And they all, the history of it, we're going to just briefly touch the history, how the DVI came into the light, how it was recognized. It wasn't really long ago, or well, way before you've been born anyway. But so Interpol is saying that DVI, the disaster victim identification, is the process, as you can see, of identifying the victims of a disaster, accident, act of terrorism, anything like that. I call natural disasters man-made. Now it's not man-made anymore. Now it's a human-made disasters. So why do we do that? The goal of each DVI process is obviously to identify accurately deceased person. Okay. Also, which helps kind of answer all the legalities as psychological, emotional, and everything else which comes with it. Okay, humanitarian as well. It looks fancy, fancy explanation, but this is what it is. So the whole history, yeah, the brief history, it all started in 1984. It gets really updated. The protocol itself gets updated every 5 years in terms of policies, different guidelines, different training programs, and so on and so forth. Within the areas, the family, the liaison, police liaison people or authority liaison people between the victim and the family or the governmental institution, whatever. So occupational care of DVI, that actually emerged after the tsunami. Previously, we didn't have, no one ever thought about sending psychologists on board who's going to be available there for all the practitioners to debrief after the heavy day, after the hard work, dealing with bodies, dealing with you know, it's just you can imagine what you've been dealing through the day, and then nowhere to turn and say, look, I'm struggling. It's very hard for me to go to work and continue work the next day. So what they did back then, they rely more or less on peer support, colleagues. After the hard working day, they would go, they sit together, have a drink and speak about this heaviness that they've been carrying it around as a professionals. Specifically, as I said, after the tsunami occurred. Okay. Also, with these Interpol policies and the guidelines, they do kind of try to make some of the changes within the compliance. They try to kind of uniform that would be globally accepted procedure, which is extremely hard though. Also, as I said previously, they're thinking this information sharing and exchange, this is about the privacy stuff. This is not that important at all, I would reckon. However, the operational assistance to countries which lack the DVI capacity is basically raising the awareness that if any disaster occurs in the neighboring countries or wherever in the world, that we put our hands up and say, we're going to go, we're going to help, if that makes sense. To be open, obviously, to travel and to leave your family behind and dedicate half of the year or maybe a year of your life helping someone in need. Country that they can't afford or don't have enough practitioners or professionals on board. Okay. Back to this history, my apology. The last one, the most recent guideline was published in 2023. But I spoke to one of the guys who actually worked in Interpol and was a director for a couple of years. He said, yeah, it does look very important. The changes are, it looks like someone is looking after it and developing and redeveloping. That's actually not the case. What the problem is, because they're changing the directive every 2 years, the moment until the person finds what is going on and what is wrong and what can be implemented and changed, that person is out of the picture. So this is the problem. They didn't really find, obviously, a logistical way how to deal with the guidelines and procedures, and obviously not change the staff, the call crew would be changed, and so on and so forth. So that's actually time lost in logistical changes, put it that way. Okay. So what? Oops. So what is the DVI within the open and closed disasters? What are the disasters? I don't know whether within your units, whether you have learned what the open disaster, closed disaster, and combination of disasters are. I am not sure whether there's something new for you or not. Is it something new for them? Maybe. So what is the open disaster? Open disaster, guys, as you can see, is literally not knowing the number of casualties. Tsunami is a good example of it. They could only guess, up and down thousands. Okay, so this is in particular rather complex disaster, and the disaster victim identification is rather complex process. A little bit less complex would be the closed disasters, where we approximately know the number of casualties. The good example of these probably would be aircraft incident, because we know it was 250 people on board, or 250 people died. And it's very easy to prepare the team. So we're not going to have thousands of people going and helping. We know exactly and logistically how to approach the situation if we have a close disaster. Okay? Whereas this one, a combination of both, open and a closed disaster, then is a trouble again. Because again, we don't know the number, we don't know the magnitude of the disaster, we don't know about the number of casualties. The good, very good example will be airplane. Yes, okay, let's guess it, 200, 250 people on board. But what if the plane actually drops on multi-million down, many, we don't know. We don't know the number. We don't know the casualties. We have no idea. We don't know how to approach it. It takes a totally different approach when you don't know where you're going and what you're going to be dealing with. Okay? So what will be the phases? Again, I don't know whether you studied this in detail. What are the phases of the DBI? As you can see, the first phase is seeing the situational examination. So it does really depend on the incident, how big it is, small or not. Very happen, geographical location, that's very important as well, whether it's very steep, whether woods, whether big trees, small trees, whether it's just the sand, whether it's ocean, we don't know that. So it's it can take weeks, sometimes months until you get to the bodies and you get to the victims to take them for the DBI itself until they're really properly recovered. Within the phase 2, the post-mortem is literally you have the bodies, we have the remains, okay? They are getting examined by a different forensic pathologist, a dentist, depending what you've got to deal with. Okay? Be very mindful that, as you probably doctors, future doctors, you probably know, sometimes you will be dealing only with the pieces of body. So you don't have a visual identification, it's not possible at all. So basically, it would be, just the pieces of bodies that need to be examined and the DNA to be done. Normally, in countries that they have developed biometric data, that's even better. If any fingerprints are available, then you take the fingerprints. If not, then the orthonormal, which is a forensic dentistry, so the scan of the teeth and so on and so forth. DNA is a very good and very quick. Actually, the quickest examination and the quickest results would be with DNA. However, many countries do not collect them for the legal purposes. In Australia, for example, they most likely would never ever approve the DNA profiling because the people are against that. Back home, where I'm coming from, Serbia, we all have our data, police and military, whatever, the government, they have our data with the fingerprints on record. And recently they started collecting the swab and DNAs. So which would probably be the quickest way to identify the person. Okay? The physical, as I said, it's very hard depending on the disaster, whether the remains are intact, the body is intact, and just a visual, either clothing, maybe possible tattoos or something like that, even surgical implants if they have the numbers. And then you can contact the lab who actually did the surgical implant and so on and so forth. This one is the easiest and more actually the quickest process itself. Okay. Within the phase 3 or antemortem phase, this is where it gets really complicated, specifically I'm talking from the Australian perspective. It gets really complicated, that liaison process between the police and the families. So, and the complaints at this stage are too many liaison people is not good because the family gets like fed up and that they don't want to talk anymore. On the other hand, who is going to train these liaison people? These guys at the moment, the liaison officers in Australia, they're police and they don't get really trained how to approach the family and how to ask for the information. Also, what happened in the past, they didn't have they didn't allocate one liaison person to one family and that the family gets really comfortable in sharing and talking and these sort of things. No, they used to have, sent many different liaison officers, and the family was not really happy to deal with everyone because they just want their loved ones to get their bodies and to bury them, to give them respect. So this is the very, very long process of getting the DNA collected from the families, whether the families would actually be happy to share the DNA and so on and so forth. If they have some sort of, let's say, a toothbrush at home, they would give it to the lab and the lab can actually compare the data, or maybe hairbrush or something like that. But if they don't, then who is willing? The family members are not very, how would I say, open and very willing to share their own DNA because they're paranoid, they don't know what the government is going to do with their DNA. So they're not really open and say, oh, well, no, just take my DNA, take my blood and compare it. I don't really care. No, they're not. They're very, very closed and don't really trust for some reasons. Within the phase 4, so this is the final one, the so-called reconciliation. So once they collect the data, they match the data, everything is done, they compare, reconcile two sets of this information. The 100% matches between the antemortem and postmortem, so they repatriate and they give the body back to the family. Okay, thanks. So basically, that was like a proper explanation what the DVI would involve in phases systematically. However, I like this one. For me, this one is just enough because I'm not a medical, I don't have a medical brain. You probably do. I like this one. The first one is literally collection of remains. So wherever the disaster happened, we collect the remains. Then we have a forensic examination, whoever is involved. And then at the end of the day, we have documentation comparison. This is it. This is how I see it. I don't see that, as I said, I'm not a medical person. And I just, like to deal with this sort of a briefer explanation by itself and easier to understand. So, yes, within the DVI, we have to collaborate with the authorities, which is a very important, working with the law enforcement, police, disaster management teams, and whoever is involved in the disaster itself. All these different charity organizations, NGOs, non-for-profit, so everyone on board. Also, again, with the family at all times until the funeral arrangements are completed. Okay? So, what was the purpose, as you can see, what was the purpose of my study? So it was literally to explore and to understand the DVI itself. That was predominantly first purpose. Second purpose, once I interview all the practitioners, as I said, 20 of those, predominantly forensic pathologists and coroners. For me, it was also very important to understand the mass disasters. So I wasn't really interested in a smaller scope of disasters. I was more or less interested in the larger disasters. And that's why all my participants actually contributed and helped during the tsunami and Bali bombing as well. I don't know whether you read about the Bali bombing as well. We lost 112 Australians that night. Okay, so my focus was on their challenges, either they've been technical, communicational, language barriers, operational, cultural, anything. I just wanted to know everything. So I always start with a pretty huge scope and then narrow down just to see what is very important. Interestingly enough, you will see later on, I highlighted that is very important, the DVI and the disaster response is very important, and particularly in a bigger scale, in particular when we have thousands and thousands of bodies. Okay? For me, it was very, very important to kind of describe and present that a psychological impact on family, that impact of culture on family, burials, and so on and so forth for everybody involved. And also how to uphold the human dignity. That was my other chapter that I discussed in detail. I have used the qualitative research methods, obviously using the interviews. I had open question interviews where they could talk whatever they wanted. I just kind of ask a little tiny question and they can expand and tell me their stories. Later on, I use the thematic analysis, obviously choosing the themes and then going from there. I don't know, but are they familiar with the research methods? The students? I don't know. Yeah? Yeah. Oh? Oh. Lectures? I hope you enjoy. I love the research. I like qualitative. I don't like quantitative. Yeah. So as you can see, the thematic, I use the thematic analysis and I sift out 5 different topics, 5 different themes out of all this process. I actually found, as you can see, we did the DBI management. I found that political and financial influences were quite strong. Political, I tell you all about this in a sec. I was quite surprised to find that actually interdisciplinary challenges were really huge. I always thought going to another culture and another country, for me, it will be communication. Because I don't understand what you're saying in Bahasa, in Indonesian, and until until you translate in English and I translate in your language, and it takes time. And I will find that quite frustrated for myself and on a daily basis. For me, that will be challenge number one. However, the Australians, they actually found that the these teams, they just don't talk to each other because simply forensic pathologists, they thought that they're very important, doctors, that they should be, how would they say, the leaders in the PBI process. Then they had forensic dentistry. They thought they're top notch, that they're very important. And they said, no, we are important. Could you imagine for police, the fingerprints, the DNA people, they're not important at all. So this probably, different egos and different styles. Everybody thought it's more important than they actually be. They didn't really have that a communal approach, but rather individualistic, not collectivistic, but rather individualistic. I do my own thing because I know I'm important. I was quite stunned by these findings, for example. Political, a big time issue in Thailand, not in Indonesia as much, but Thailand, yes, because all the disaster management process was actually carried out by the military, and they didn't want anyone else from other country other than Thailand, obviously. They didn't want anyone on board. That's why they lost significant time until they said, oh, well, yes, okay, come to Thailand, help us out because we have so many victims to deal with. But they haven't been very much open, to have a foreign police and foreign specialists and foreign military on their grounds at all whatsoever. And months later, like 6-7 months later, they kind of seized that kind of how would they say, they just had that demeanor that, like, they've been monitoring, they spend more time actually controlling what these guys were doing instead of doing their own work. This is what happened in Thailand. Okay. Also, I didn't really, my questions were not really focused on culture and religion. back then. But while talking to my practitioners, they shared their opinion with me, not even been asked. But opinion that I wasn't really, as I said, honestly, I didn't really think at the time about it. I was more into politics and how the politics would actually interfere with the DVI process. However, once they shared their opinion, how not important certain cultural aspects are, and that the professionalism comes first, and the culture was approximately last thing that they would think of. Then what I thought, oh well, no, let's explore. I'm looking forward to find out the importance in different religions and different beliefs within the DVI process itself, if not within the disaster management. It will be nice to have the manuals to kind of get everybody on board in understanding that actually disaster doesn't destroy your home. The disaster doesn't destroy your family. Disaster destroy you and destroy your culture. Okay? That's very important. Ritual beliefs, but everything else comes with it. As you can see, I spoke about the effective collaboration with different governmental bodies in different countries. As I said, I found that Thailand was quite challenging. For example, the foreign teams, when they came to Thailand, they wanted to conduct the DVI identification, let's call it identification of their own citizens. How and what they thought at the time, that's quite interesting. How would I know who is from you guys, from this group, how someone is from my culture, from my country? How am I supposed to know? We all dress the same. So you can't really use any codes. When you have thousands of dead bodies, how would you know which national is German, which national is Australian? But they spend weeks and weeks saying, "Nah, we're not gonna touch. We're not gonna be part of any business. We just want to identify our victims and take the remains with us." Then they understood that's not gonna happen eventually. That's not possible. They have to work on every single body as it comes. They can't really know which one is from which area and country and so on and so forth. That was quite interesting and amazing, how they came up with that idea. We're gonna join, we're gonna go, we're gonna do our own, and we're gonna go. We're gonna leave. Leave you to it, you can do it. Terrible, isn't it? What is this? Does it go anywhere? Yeah. Operational guys and logistical challenges, very, very big problem. Australian practitioners found that, shared that they were not prepared. And yes, they're not prepared. They do have a certain exercises. What if this disaster occurs, and what we're gonna do, and there is a process to follow, tick the boxes, and so on and so forth. But still, no one prepares you for mass disaster and for so many bodies like tsunami back then. There is no preparation process that actually can prepare anyone. Also in Australia, what I have found that we don't have a list of, let's say, a list of people that they be called in if something occurs. Also, what they said, I was not prepared. I was just called in the morning, and they told me, "Oh, pack up your stuff and you go." Sometimes you don't even know where you're going. You don't. You haven't been told where you're going. You pick up your passport and go. That's very, very. But this is actually a nature of the disaster. if we know that something's going to happen, probably it's not going to be disaster then. You know, we will be very well prepared. That's a thing. So there is nothing to prepare us for the large scale disasters at all. Okay. Ethical consideration, that's a little bit boring, but yes, there are some of the practitioners, they said there were some issues there. Again, out of my research, I came up with a kind of recomposable recommendations out of all of these stories that I've heard from these guys. Probably the one will be training the practitioners better, maybe organizing more often, kind of mimicking disasters and these sort of things, and then work on that. Also, I think it's a very and entirely important to prepare police force and medical staff or whoever is part of the DVI to teach them about different cultures. To quite often have a guest speaker from different culture who is going to share what their culture involves. What if something like that happened with this particular culture? How you should be responding and how you would and best perform and meet the culture of that particular nation. I know it's really impossible to train every single Australian how to behave in a certain places. But then, you know, just having a guest speakers and, you know, having a cultural competency training, that will be, I think, one of the possibilities. Okay. Also, I kind of suggested the policy reforms which would categorically enhance integrity, coordination, and obviously resources allocation. I also found that the psychological support and mental health support is very big and very important. Having a psych on board who is going to be there available 24/7, literally for the professionals who are working very hard during the DVI process. It's very, very important to debrief. It's very important to simply talk about your day. Okay. Also, I found that babies, as I said, doing test training, what they have to use, maybe very modern digitalization, or they don't have to go and have a lecture face to face. No, these days could be obviously digitalized. It's easy, very easy to follow. Also, it's very important to have that robust, that I wouldn't call it global, but very robust psychological support. It doesn't really matter where you are, which country, the psychologists get trained pretty much the same wherever you go. With the same perspective, with the same theories, everything is pretty much same. I wouldn't use the word similar, but same. Also, counseling is very important itself. If we don't have on board the qualified psychologists, we always can utilize the counselors, and we are going to just simply talk with our professionals. Also, I found that at the moment, the standardization of the protocols to facilitate the collaboration between the particular agencies and the countries where you're going to, as a team from Australia, that's very tricky one as well. Also, community engagement with the local communities and families to get that community familiar with other culture, that we are there, we are here to help, and you know, we are there to learn from you as well as you are there to learn from us. So that collaboration within the community, that's a very vital aspect of the DVI process itself. Are they gonna fall asleep or not? Okay. So that will be it. These are my findings, as I said, while I spoke to some very important people in Australia. Yes, they did share that the communication was really tricky in some parts. They didn't have translator, interpreter willing to be part of the DBI process itself. Obviously, the situation was not very pleasant. The weather and whatever other challenges, therefore they couldn't really, communicate well. Going back a couple of words about this MH17, that was a tricky one as well. The plane was Malaysian. The guys who actually lost their lives were partially Dutch. And anyway, the DBI was conducted in Amsterdam, in Holland. So there were some kind of atrocities between the teams from Holland and obviously but they didn't have any part in the DBI. That was actually very unpleasant to decide who is going to be a leader, who is going to lead the DBI. Are the Dutch, because obviously it's the Dutch nationals, they lost their lives, or is it the Malaysians because it was just bad. Okay, until they came to agreement that no one should be a leader as such. The most important thing is actually to identify the bodies, obviously give them back to their families. So do you have any questions before all you fall asleep? Me talking? Any questions? So what is your opinion? Is it really important to know and incorporate your religion and the culture within the DBI process itself? Or you should behave as a professionals and not care? Tricky one. Anyone? Profession comes first? Oh, you're serious. I don't like that. I wasn't really looking for that one. So,
But yeah.
what was that?
Yeah.
Ah, yeah. Okay, welcome. Welcome.
Oke, silakan. Silakan teman-teman, mungkin ada yang no, Naomi want SDMC. Ya, silakan Naomi.
Oh, yes. Sorry, guys. Online guys. Sorry. I totally ignored you. Say, ask any questions.
Okay, Miss Natasha, maybe I have a question for you. Previously, you talked about the importance of having interdisciplinary practice in DVI. But my question for you is there any challenges in applying interdisciplinary that comes from the family's victim itself? Because from what I see, I think it is kind of an international problem that maybe if the help is coming, for example, maybe a nurse come and give the help, but maybe the family's victims, they don't trust the nurse and they want a doctor, and maybe there are that level of distrust. Yes. Yes, so my question is there in Australia, and what you find in your research, do that happen? And if that happen, is that really important? Is that an important thing to consider and to finish? Because maybe that can be an issue in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I didn't have experience on that. I think it's a very marginal difference. Whether someone is a nurse or is a doctor. I personally never had any issues and never had any questions saying, oh, well, we don't want to discuss this because you're a nurse. We want to discuss this because it's a doctor. Really didn't have that, that I know, that I'm aware of. No. But yes, they do have quite of an issue with the liaison paper and preparedness of the liaison practitioners who are going to be between obviously the governmental institution and the family in the training of that particular person. And most likely quite often, they're not very comfortable, they like something else or of higher authority, if you know what I mean. So someone on the higher authority maybe knows a little bit better, but no.
Thank you so much for the answer.
Anyone else?
Teman-teman yang ada di Zoom, mungkin kalau mau bertanya boleh di kolom komentar. Nanti akan kita bacakan Natasha, silahkan. Teman-teman yang lain ada? Boleh angkat tangannya, berdiri, bahasa Indonesia, bahasa Aceh. Kalau nggak bisa bahasa Inggris nggak apa-apa. Kalaupun saya nggak bisa terjemahkan, kita minta bantuan yang lain, silahkan. Ayo. Silahkan.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity, and I'd like to ask some questions. Actually, you had mentioned earlier about the DVI working area, especially like the major or minor disasters. So I'd like to ask about more the minor disasters such as mothering, murdering people or something like that that happens in a serial killer sometimes. Is there any challenging stuff that happens during the victim identifications of the murdering victims that has been long mutilated and apart by the what you call it, by the killer itself? And is there any the international standards of the Interpol maybe that we have to look up for the identifying victims of the murdering itself?
Not that I'm aware of. That's a very simple answer. There is a certain protocol that needs to be followed. There are certain papers, what's called yellow paper or white paper or something like that. That's the only thing that I know, but there is a process of doing the EDI. So personally, I don't know. I can't really answer that, and not that I'm aware of. No. Okay, makes sense? Okay. Anyone? Yes. You can, in your language, if you're more comfortable.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. I would like to ask, considering that Australia and Indonesia itself is a country with high tourism, how would you identify disaster victims that, let's say, their identification is not found with them, and their DNA sample or perhaps their fingerprints or odontologic records are not found, or their DNA is not identifiable? How would you identify these tourists with, let's say, no identification and cannot be identified through DNA or odontology?
I wasn't really catching the second part. So the visual identification is not possible. So the dental is not possible either.
Yes.
Probably we're gonna go to DNA.
Yes.
Probably DNA will be the option. The comparison from the families back home in Australia. That's what I have learned.
Probably with DNA, right? But the other issue is that we cannot identify them through documents like passports or identity cards like driver's license.
Are we talking about, for example, an Australian who lost a life in Indonesia? Was that the question?
Yes.
Probably the DNA is going to be collected from the family members or whatever they've got from their own place, their own home. That's how the comparison is going to be conducted. Yes.
How would you who the family of the victim is?
If the person does not have, probably that's going to be a very lengthy one because most likely the family back home needs to file the missing person request, and these sort of things. If the person does not have any papers, obviously, while being away.
So it will also depend on the family to.
Yeah, families. Some going through liaison process with the families.
All right, thank
This
you.
is the only.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. This is the only way. Oh, okay.
Ada lagi mungkin yang mau ditanyakan? Bapak boleh, Bapak.
Oh, more questions.
My name is Iskandar. Local, the Western call me Alexander.
Alexander?
Local people call me Iskandar.
Skandal.
Local people, but the Western is Alexander.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you very much for your coming and for your lecture. It is really interesting to me and really increased my knowledge about this. Especially in Aceh, we we can say very less our knowledge about disaster, especially what we call it a forensic disaster. So after listening your explanation, I think it is very interesting, very important. So before I don't know it's all about this. So my question may be a little bit deviation or different. Yeah. I saw it on your your point. There is about a collaboration. So my question is, based on your experience, based on your research, did you see a relationship between about the sister and spirituality? Sorry.
Unfortunately,
based on you.
unfortunately not.
Oh.
At least that's why my PhD is going to be focusing more on different spiritualities and cultures and religion, importance of those within the DVI.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, do you know that actually no one ever researched the importance of culture and religion within the disaster management, neither DVI? Because they have a medical brain, they think about the process. Number one, that's what they have to do. Number two, that's what I'm going to do. So they don't have time to think about it. For me, it's extremely hard to compile a chapter of my literature review. It's going to look very bold and pale because I can't really use any of the previous studies because they are not none. So I will be the first one discussing these sort of things and importance of culture and religion within the DVI process itself. So don't ever decide to study your PhD based on something that no one ever did it. Don't do it. Otherwise, that's a struggle, yes?
Yes, Natasha, there's a question from the Zoom. This is from Ibu Intan. Ibu Intan is one of the psychologist lecturer that she is in Yogyakarta to have her PhD now. Can you read it or I need to read it?
Intan?
Yes. Oh, oke. Kak Intan mungkin boleh tanyakan langsung. Boleh open mic, Kak? Ibu Intan? Ibu Okta udah kangen dengar suara Bu Intan. Boleh open mic, boleh Bu? Oh, nggak ada. Nah, okay. This is the question. Referring to several crises and disaster in Indonesia, which is natural disaster, airplane crisis, and act of terrorism, such as bombing, a number of national TV conducted coverage and live broadcast and were not far from the location of the building or area where the DVI process took place. The live broadcast indirectly causes negative emotional turmoil in the viewers, whether they are families, relatives of the victim, or the community at large. It is common for viewers to make premature assumption about how some of the officers conducting the VI are not empathetic because they don't appear to display appropriate facial expression. Some officers were seen leaving the forensic examination room laughing when they could have been talking about something else and not laughing at the victim being identified. Similarly, when the reporter interviewed the VI officers, especially how they respond to questions about the condition of the identified victim. Okay, in addition to performing their duty professionally, are those in charge or DVI team equipped with supporting skills such as verbal and nonverbal communication and other relevant matters? Is there a spokesperson assigned to deliver identification results in brief, especially to the victim's family? What about the victim's care and family support point? To what extent are protocol in place and what resource are required for this aspect? To what extent are psychology resources involved?
Okay, thank you very much, Clea, for your your questions. There are like quite a few, quite many. Look, I think since the tsunami have changed DVI itself. Okay, it did really change a lot. So since then, we understood the importance of the psychological well-beings. So now I don't know, I can't confirm 100%. However, I do strongly believe if, God forbid, that happens again, or not, I do believe strongly that these guys will be more supported and more psychologists would put their hands up and then come and kind of contribute and help the professionals. Definitely. What was the second? Communication. I can't answer that one because look, if I provide you with the answer on DVI professionals, I would cover many industries. So I can't really say whether the medical staff, for example, pathologist or odontologist, forensic dentistry, DNA people, are they actually prepared for that? Or communicate different communication styles? I don't know. I can only tell you based on what we have learned, what kind of lesson we have learned during the tsunami DVI. So this is the area that I have covered. This is what they have shared. So basically, do they have any training in communication, nonverbal communication? I don't think so. Strongly believe no. Maybe police, they do. Some, I don't know. Can I see the questions? Because there were quite a few, like 5 different questions. But definitely, those in charge, whether I look, very hard to say. And as I said, I spoke to some police officers and they said, well, we do have a training every year. We just kind of try to demonstrate a kind of a terrorist attack or something like that, and we do trainings. Is it actually enough? And are these guys who are getting trained this year, are they going to be available next year for potential, if the potential disaster occurs? It's very hard to prepare you for something that might never happen. It's quite hard. I mean, you can have a solid training on particular issue. However, the question is, how would you prepare every single profession that is involved in DVI? That's very tricky, very hard. The number is big, it's huge. Is there a spokesperson? Yes, it's always a spokesperson, at least in Australia. Yes, for the victim's family, the liaison office is correct. Yes, they are. What about the victim care? Yes, the family does receive the significant psychological, emotional support on the way, through the process. Yes, To what extent the protocols in place, which resources are required for this aspect? Basically, counselors, psychologists, anything what comes to psychological, emotionally support the families of the victims, trained and qualified staff. What are psychology resources involved? Yeah. As I said, psychs, counselors, very much so.
Okay. Anyone else? There's any question? Ada lagi pertanyaan? Oke. Ya, silakan Mira.
Um, I want to ask about if there a disaster, it also have maybe it also have secondary trauma symptom for DVI teams. So I want to ask about what most susceptible person that affect that affect the secondary trauma symptom, like what like maybe from a nurse, doctor, or psychologist that most susceptible for secondary trauma symptom. So which one? One of them the most susceptible for secondary trauma symptom.
Oh, that's a very hard one to answer. I mean, very honestly, no, I have no idea. I have no idea how to answer that question, though. Which one would be the most, let's say, appropriate or more suitable? But that I don't know. Honestly, everybody, look, the DVI these days, DVI process and DVI teams are so colorful these days. When I say colorful, so many occupations and educational backgrounds are actually incorporated. So it's very hard to say this one is important and this one we don't need it, because it's simply growing, how would I say? For example, anthropologists, recently anthropologists get really involved as well. So it's a really tricky question. I think everyone's got a fair opportunity and, equal opportunities to be part of the DVI team, though. This is my opinion. You don't have to be trained medical staff, no.
Okay, thank you.
Still have research time. If any question left? Maybe one more question? Ada lagi? Satu lagi? Oke, silakan.
I might be not giving question, but giving my opinions because before open the question session, the Mrs. asked about our opinions, whether we should choose between the professional first or cultural first, and my opinion and my choices is same as Mrs. itself. I choose the cultural first because of what? Because when we first time meet someone with different nationalities, different languages, we don't know each other's, but when we face each other's, we gratitude, we behave really respectively. They could come to us, they could open up, so they might tell stories about us and will not fed up. They will not fed up whether we ask a lot of questions. And even a professor itself, if they has a lot of knowledge itself, but they don't know how to reach up to the other person, who don't have really good enough attitude to approach someone, their knowledge is not really giving impact to someone's. So that's why cultural should come first when we come to DVI itself, because we don't know disaster would happen in an area in countries with maybe they're developing countries. They don't know English language. They don't know how to communicate with each other. But when we show all of respect, we show good attitude, they will open up. They will open us. They will uh, accept our help and accept our support. So yeah, I choose culture first. Uh, I choose the culture first rather than professional itself. And you already said that there is a lot of barriers between interdisciplinary. We see each other's that this one profession is more important than the other itself. That really showed us that professional itself, if we don't have a really good enough attitude itself, they will don't have any impact to us. And that's why we should respect each other's and we know that behavior itself is way bigger and way important than knowledge itself. So that's why culture should come first to the device itself rather than professional. Maybe that's my perspective of culture and profession when we go to the DeFi. Maybe that's my opinion.
Thank you. That was exactly what I was looking for.
It's really a rap, right? It's really a rap.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. Okay. Because also about the time, because it's already 4 now, so the time is off. But if there's something you want to give conclusion or something,
One more story to tell you,
Okay.
because I love talking. Yeah, that's my problem. I tell you the story. I can't really. I can't remember the pathologist doctor, forensic pathologist. He was actually working on the bodies in one of the Western countries in Europe. Yeah. So that's where the culture came first. It was like a group from Australia, Europe, whatever. They've been all sitting together. So the pathologist, what he did, he approached the fridge, where they keep the bodies, yeah, the door, knock on the door, probably said quick prayer, I don't know. And these guys were in this belief, like, why would you knock on the fridge or a freezer, whatever, door? That person is dead anyway. Are you expecting probably to say that someone else is going to be behind the door and get your approval to open up this door or what? No, see, that culture, I think that's amazing. That pathologist, he actually respected that person in their own way, whereas any other forensic pathologist will probably open up the freezer and take the body out. So they're not going to think about that importance to respect that. Does that make any sense to you? Yeah? I love that story when they told me. They were terrified because that particular doctor would always knock on the freezer door. Interesting, isn't it? So, yeah, guys, thanks very much for having me.
Okay. Thank you very much, Natasha. Thank you.
So I will get back to you guys with my new findings about
Yes.
culture and religion
Yes. Right.
and how important is that.
Yes. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you.